If I could have the attention of even the people now serving their plates. I hate to do this, but unfortunately there was a meeting that went long here, and so we are going to just get going, and I'll talk really loud, and I'm going to read a little something, so I hope that that will work for you. Please do continue to get your food. Come on up and join us here at the table. I don't think we're doing, are we doing AD beside your book?
No, I'm doing
So you won't miss anything if you sit at the table seats. I'm Geneva Overholser. Welcome to the Journalism Directors Forum. We have a special treat today with our own Judy Muller, a professor in the journalism school, who has written a wonderful book, as you all know, called Emus Loose in Egnar, Big Stories from Small Towns. Judy is a distinguished broadcast professor here, has had a remarkable career in both television and radio, and has continued that career richly while fulfilling the duties of a full-time tenured professor here at USC Annenberg, and continuing to be on television with KCET and on radio with KPCC. So really a remarkable career. And KCRW, no, KPCC. Yeah, you looked at me. You think it's right.
Well, the show was just canceled.
It was just canceled. Well, so she's been garnering Emmys and DuPonts and this kind of recognition for her entire work life, not to mention remarkable evaluations from her students, and she's just a really...
Hear that, students?
That's right. That's what counts, right? That's why we're all here. But in this interesting book, she has returned to her roots, which were in weekly newspapering. And Judy is going to introduce our special guest, who is one of the editors whom she features in this book. But I wanted to do a couple of show and tell things. One is that this is this morning's LA Times op-ed page, where Judy has a wonderful op-ed. And in yesterday's New York Times, she was richly quoted. She's one of our quote meisters here. She does really great. She gives great quote. So there's something here I have to read because it was mine. I loved this book, as you can see. It's well dog-eared, and I actually got it signed at an earlier occasion. We have books for sale.
Yes, at 1
and
o'clock.
you all will be able to buy books out here and get them signed, actually by not only the author, but one of the wonderful editors in them. But I just love this maybe to me as a former newspaper editor in particular. Judy says, once you get the hang of it, decoding the small town paper style becomes somewhat addictive. I am often rewarded with new finds simply by sampling papers in towns I'm passing through, like the Dolores, Colorado Star, the voice of the Dolores River Valley since 1897. Under the headline, Lux resigns as Dolores mayor, we read a letter by Mayor Tommy Lux. Quote, due to recent circumstances with my personal life and town issues, I feel that my positive overall attitude will be affected and my best judgment for which I was elected will now be impaired. In further remarks made to the paper, Lux says that had he stayed as mayor, quote, I wouldn't have been laughing and outgoing and fun. I would have been a different person, and that's not right. And finally this, my resignation had nothing to do with Rhonda or any other people in town. You won't find that in the New York Times. Okay, so it's my great pleasure to turn it over to Judy, who will introduce Laurie as well.
Yes, it's really nice to be here. I attend these all the time, and now it's fun to be the center of attention. Thank you for that lovely introduction. By the way, nowhere in that article is Rhonda ever named, but if you live there, you don't have to ask, and if you don't live there, they don't care. So that's the typical local newspaper. I'm really thrilled that Laurie Ezzell Brown is here today. Laurie never takes time off. She is the editor of a weekly paper in the Panhandle of Texas, the Canadian Record. She takes 1 week at Christmas, so this is a very rare thing indeed that we got her to come. And she's really experiencing LA, close personal. She won a Courage in Journalism Award some years ago. She and her family, she's the second generation of the Canadian Record. Her father, well, I'm going to read a little bit about that. But I can't possibly tell you everything about Laurie in this amount of time. But she's truly inspirational to me. I've been to Canadian twice. I love it there. It's a charming little town. But it is a tough place. For one thing, to be a Democrat. And she is highly respected in this very conservative town because she's fair. She's a hell of a journalist. She stands up for people who wouldn't ordinarily be represented. And I'm going to have her talk about some of the stories she's done recently that weren't in the book that I didn't have time to include. She took on a local district attorney who she had good information he was smuggling cocaine or heroin. Rich Roach.
He had smuggled cocaine.
Okay. But at any rate, he sued her when he lost an election, blaming the paper. And even though he eventually lost that lawsuit, he hurt her because he was a lawyer. He didn't have to. I mean, he could do it. And she had to defend herself legally and drained her resources. And it's that kind of thing that's the fragility of these local papers. One powerful person goes after you, it can be very, very financially difficult. Eventually, he was arrested, tried, and sent off to prison. But instead of having any kind of schadenfreude about it, Laurie's response was, because she wrote about it, but she felt sorry for his family because they had to listen in court. She had true compassion for his kids who had to hear all this. And so that's the difference. When you live next door to the people you report about, it changes everything. And it's very easy for people like me, network correspondent. I'm airdropped into a town and I leave. And it's not that I'm not careful and compassionate and fair. It's just that I don't have to wake up the next morning and see those people in the grocery store line. And believe me, being shunned in a small town, you feel it. So I just want to read a little bit of the chapter about Laurie, just a very short part, and it's called Crusaders. There's another chapter called Curmudgeons. She's not there yet, but here she's getting there. One night in 1961, in the small town of Canadian, Texas, 9-year-old Laurie Ezzell awoke to the sound of a rock crashing through her bedroom window. It left a hole in the screen and shattered the glass. She was startled, but not surprised. Dad's written another editorial, she thought. Her father, Ben Ezzell, had purchased the Canadian Record in this panhandle town in 1948 and promptly established a reputation as a fiercely independent, stubborn maverick, a reputation that followed him all the way to the obituary page. Cussed and Disgust was the headline on his obit in the Amarillo Globe. The rock hurled through his daughter's window was typical of readers' reactions to his more controversial stands. On that particular occasion, the article was an expose of a little-known group called the John Birch Society. Ezzell warned his readers not to join if you place any value on your freedom. The story was reprinted around the country, and the Record got more than its usual share of angry letters. By the late 60s, Ezzell had moved on to other issues, the Vietnam War, for one. I am ashamed of what my country is doing in this war, in my name and in the name of all of us, he wrote in one of his weekly columns in 1968. One local businessman was so angry, he said he'd quit advertising in the Canadian Record and tried to organize a boycott by the merchants in town. Ironically, he had only one good way to get the word out. Ben Ezzell sold him a half-page ad. The boycott failed. Yeah. Okay, so it goes on. The backlash from their father's outspoken editorial policy in this small town of 2,300 was hard on all 6 Ezzell children, but especially on the youngest, who were in high school during the turbulent 60s. But whipping out was not an option. Laurie, the youngest daughter and the one who would grow up to take her father's place, says that toughness is the genetic curse of our family. Genetic, perhaps, but also forged clearly in her father's weekly habit of practicing the First Amendment with such gusto. She and her siblings grew up being very aware of political issues, and both parents encouraged them to express their opinions. At the same time, she says they had to answer for their dad's liberal political views. It was hard to be a teenager wanting to blend in, she recalls. And some of the stories are harrowing, what she went through in high school, and the bullying. But it's okay. Her mother wrote a regular column because she knew she'd be what they call a linotype widow if she didn't go to the office with her father. She wrote, until last year, a column called patter, which was a lot of great moments in that alone. Laurie has taken on everything from the hog farms that wanted to locate in the Panhandle. She went after them for well, she warned everybody of what they would do to the water tables and the pollution in the areas and what they'd done in other. And so it ended up, those hog farms didn't come in. You got the pigs out. You got out, what do you call the 3 Ps of the Texas plutonium pigs?
Plutonium pigs in prison.
And prisons, yeah. So those are 3 things you're always, do you want those in your town? Kind of thing. So she writes very strong editorials. And it's amazing because she loses friends. She's lost friends over them. She keeps writing the truth. This is from one column, her column is Field Notes. She wrote about a visit to her newspaper office by 2 of my elders and fellow Democrats, and this was during running up to the election of Obama. They came to talk about politics in general and their dislike of Barack Obama in particular. And this is quoting from the column. Believing, I suppose, that I'm a sympathizer, both men affirm their staunch opposition to presidential candidate Barack Obama, which is fine, in terms that raise haunting images of the Deep South, white sheets and burning crosses, which is not. I feel shame and rage, but I also feel the stirrings of resolve as my now unwelcome guests depart. Laurie didn't report exactly what they said, which included the N-word, politically. She was so upset by their casual racism, so angry that they were fellow members of the Democratic Party, a rare enough breed in Canadian, that she told them, please leave. They threw down their newspapers and walked out, and Laurie sat down at her computer. And this is what she wrote. Their vitriol and animosity infused this office with a stink I had thought, hoped, and prayed, though never quite dared to believe, long gone from my hometown. My stomach roils in remembrance of similar words spoken to me as a child. And I'll skip over it. The past has visited me in 2 old men, their voices cracked with age, their faces creased with time and hints of sorrow, their fear and hatred so long held, so resistant to thought, it's calcified. Perhaps the Democratic Party will rise again in this country, but if it rises, it will not be on the shoulders of men like these, who still hate and fear and long for a time when the white man's supremacy was unchallenged. And that's just part of it. I asked her, I called her and I said, what happened? I mean, those men must have been furious. It was in the paper. And she says, well, the funniest thing, a few weeks later, they walked into the office like nothing had happened. And we all just got on with it. They wanted it. And that's sometimes what happens. So I had a lot of fun writing this book. I went to a lot of towns, Canadian, Texas, in the Panhandle, Concrete, Washington. Concrete, where they're cementing the future for 100 years. Where I was actually in the parade. I was on the float of the Concrete Herald throwing papers to the crowd. People would come up and hug the editor. I mean, it's amazing what these papers mean to these communities. It really reminded me of why I love this business. Business being the operative word right now, because these papers are thriving. Whereas the big newspaper dailies, as we know, big city dailies, are in trouble. The small papers are doing what the big papers are not talking about. But they're, the term's hyperlocal, for instance. They've been doing hyperlocal for decades. They never called it that. But they've got an audience that can't get that news anywhere else. And they're not giving it away for the most part. And most of these editors have got websites, and I'll show you Laurie's in a minute. And they're charging for it. And they've got advertisers who so far find that the most ideal place to advertise, although Laurie can talk about some of those shifts. And that's, but more than anything, what I found was people who represent the glue in their community, and they take some hard hits. Laurie's had bullets shot through her window. But this is not, I talked to the Gish family in Kentucky. Their newspaper office was burned down in the 60s, I guess. It turned out it was a coal mine thug hired by the coal company, because they were always taking on the coal mine companies. And it turned out it was a police officer who'd been hired by them to burn down the office. He was never sent to prison. Got, probation or something. That guy later ran for office and had a vanity plate that said Eagle Burner. This was the Mountain Eagle was the paper. Eagle Burner on his license plate, and for campaign gifts, he gave away matchbooks. And these people continued. The Courage in Journalism Award is named for that family, the Gishes. And I can't think of a better way to lead into Laurie. And I'm going to have to switch over this microphone to you. You don't have to actually put it on. You just have to talk into it. Because we're recording this. And I want Laurie to talk. I'm going to ask her some questions. I think that's our best way to do this. Because I've been hearing some of her stories lately. And Laurie was telling me about how she had to cover a fire recently. You've got a staff of what, 5? Yes. So you're going to have to hold that. You're going to have to hold that up. Just hold it up. Here, okay. Let's do this. Okay. Well, no, that's not good.
Guess y'all can guess I don't do this much.
Okay. She was out covering the fire. She's got a staff, but she does most of the reporting. She covers all the meetings. I mean, it's just full time. But she's also the photographer. You know, she's doing what you guys, what we're teaching you is all about, everything. So I'd like you to tell me what it was like, now that you're having to do Twitter and Facebook and everything else, to go out and cover a story.
Yeah, well, we're always trying to adjust to the new electronic media and use it in a way that's beneficial. And we go to workshops and we're told, use this, don't feel threatened by it. So we're fumbling around trying to find a way to use it. We've had wildfires like you've read about in Texas. We've had them in our community, or around our community too. So I'm out at one wildfire and it's late at night. I've speeded home from Oklahoma City so I can get there because I know this is happening and I need to be there with a camera. Fairly harrowing. The winds were 50 and 60 mile an hour gusts. The heat is horrible. The whole panhandles, there are fires all over the panhandle on this day, and I'm covering a couple of them. It's getting dark. I'm in a county the adjacent county that I don't know the roads. I don't know well where I am. I'm juggling a camera, a notebook. I've got my iPhone because people want to hear about this. They want to know what's happening and they want to know it right now. And so I'm seeing people, when I stop, I'm seeing people are texting me and I'm seeing things on Facebook. People are wondering, how bad is it? What homes are threatened? And I know I have this responsibility to get this information out as fast as I can, but I'm one person in a car. It's getting dark. There are fire trucks and police cars everywhere, and you don't want to get in their way. You want to be aware of how the wind's blowing and where the fire line is and whether it's shifting and whether you're in the direct line of it. And it's just a lot to keep track of that, plus unfamiliar roads. And I stop and one officer says, well, if you take this road and go to so-and-so's house and take a left, you can get around it. Well, I don't know that person or where they live. So, it's pretty complicated. But and I'm trying to figure out how to juggle a camera. I get out of the car. I have my cell phone because I've been trying to text on it. And the cell phone falls out on the ground. It's getting dark. I have to find it. It's just a lot to juggle. But I'm trying to send this information, get good pictures, and not get killed in the process. Another fire I went to, though, the fire chief said, hey, hop in my truck. I grabbed all my camera equipment and my cell phone and hopped in the fire chief's truck. And we were driving hell-bent for leather going through the fire line. I mean, he said, it's going to look kind of bad for a minute, so don't panic. Driving right through the fire line. But this whole time, because he's driving and I'm just a passenger, I can text people and I can post things to Facebook. And the hunger for this information is just phenomenal. I mean, as soon as I post something, people are posting back. They want to know more. They want to know where it is. They want to know where it's going. They want to know if I've seen their husbands who are out there fighting the fires. It's just, It's pretty compelling stuff. So we're just trying to figure out how to have 4 hands instead of 2, and use all the technology that's available to us, but do a good job still with the basics, which I'm a writer and a photographer, and that's what I care about. And so it's just an interesting transition time that we're in.
You recently had a sports writer quit. He's actually mentioned in the book, and so this is Friday Night Lights country. You know, Texas football, high school football, this is a big beat for them. So having a sports reporter, even on a small paper, is a big deal. I loved her other guy because he didn't want to taint his ethical boundaries by taking a T-shirt from the team or having a hat or a mug that the team wanted. It's really funny. So pure. I'm not going to root for the team. You know, I have to cover it like they have to understand. You know, but this is Texas, small town, and they won the state championship twice, so it's a big deal. That was a special edition, right? So a lot of ads. So it's big, big news. So she put out an ad. Tell them about looking for a sports writer, and this is good for our students to know because.
Yeah, this was interesting. I'd always found people in the community to work for me, and actually Jason was our first sports writer. I'd always covered the sports before, and I was not good at it, but I was faithful to it. This guy came along. He had met my business manager's daughter, and they had corresponded. Well, they had talked on the phone quite a bit. He had lived in Oklahoma City. They met each other. They dated. They got together. He moved to Canadian. I found out he'd gone to journalism school briefly, and that he loved sports. So I said, "Come talk to me." And we talked for a while. I hired him on the spot. Said, "You know, your new beat is sports writing and selling ads." I gave him 2 jobs. I needed 2 people. So, well, the advertising salesperson job quickly faded as the football team got better, and we were on track to go to state and everything. So he turned it into a full-time sports writing job, and it actually paid its way. I mean, because of the very big sports coverage that we were doing, we sold lots of ads to people, and of course we had a successful team. Well, when Jason quit after 5 years to actually make real money, I knew by then I was spoiled and I needed a sports writer. So I advertised it on a couple of press association websites. I was amazed because within 2 days I had 50 applications, and good ones, for the job. And I'd never done this. I had to figure out how to screen all these applicants and, you know, try and get some information about them. You know, I've already got enough jobs. I'm doing Jason's sports writing job. I'm doing my job. I'm trying to manage this business, and I'm also trying to hire somebody, and it was just pretty overwhelming. So I sent out an email to all the applicants, and I said, "You don't understand. This town is 2,600 people. It's 2 hours from Walmart. It doesn't pay that great. This is the salary range. I really talked it down. And maybe too much, I thought. I might have gone over the line. But I said, why don't you just write back to me and let me know if you're still interested? Thinking maybe I'd hear from a couple of them. They all wrote back. Every single one of them said, I'm in. Please keep me on your list. So then, I had to figure out how to screen that some more. Students, you need to know, Facebook and Twitter are great places to screen candidates for jobs. One candidate who I thought was probably pretty promising, I went on looked at his Twitter feeds, and I found him writing something about how his parents said, my parents said they'd buy me a new car if I'd find a job. I just knew immediately I didn't want it. So It's a great resource for checking people out. But I hired this guy from Jersey, of all places. He's 22 years old, fresh out of the box. I mean, he's energetic. He said, I always wanted to cover sports, and what better place to cover high school sports than Texas.
Did he go to journalism school?
He did. He had just finished J school. So, and he's great. He's energetic. He bought his first cowboy hat the first week. And he stopped on his way home from Amarillo after he bought his cowboy hat and went to a rodeo. So he's a gem.
But you also discovered in screening some of these people that they didn't bother to look up much about Canadian. They hadn't really looked at the paper. They hadn't done their due diligence to say, here's what I like about what you do, and here's what I like about your town. And that eliminated a lot of people, so you should know that. When
it was the first question I asked each candidate. So, tell me a little bit about Canadian Texas. And it was amazing. I was thunderstruck. One of them had actually read about Canadian Texas and the Canadian record, read the Canadian record, read about the Canadian Wildcats, which the team's been written about quite a bit, including the New York Times. So it's not hard to get information about this town. And Andrew, the guy I hired, he didn't wait to be asked. When I called him, he said, hey, I've been reading your paper. I followed the team sign. I mean, he knew. So, boy, do your research.
By the way, Canadian is named for the Canadian River. A lot of people don't understand why is there a Canadian Texas. And it's a beautiful little town, but when I was driving there from Amarillo, and you have to understand, I'm out there, this is a reporting, I had a lot of fun, but I'm out there alone, I'm driving a rental car from Amarillo, and it's forever and never across the most desolate flat. And in fact, one guy said to me, I said, it's really flat coming in here. He goes, yeah, Amarillo, you can see your dog run away for 3 days. She's just been giving me, I'm just not going to shoot you at the end of the day. And I'm going, that's great, just great stuff. But it's a beautiful little town. It's been restored beautifully with some very old Victorian mansions. And it's quite charming. They've redone this Art Deco movie theater. It's like the Back to the Future set, when you go back in time. It's really lovely. But getting back to the Too Close for Comfort, I don't know if any of you know Lake Woebegone, the fictional Garrison Keillor place. There's a fictional editor, Harold Starr, who's the editor of the Herald Star. And his motto is, hey, I have to live here too. Which is, and in that spectrum of how much do you vary the lead not to offend people, over to bravery, which I would put Laurie at the top of that list. Where do you stand? And right now, she's talking to me today, and because I've been there, I know the people involved, about something she's got to deal with. And this is a very prominent family in town, often on friends of yours, depending on what you write. Tell them what's happening there, a little bit if you can.
It's a complex story, but basically it's a family that's divided, a very wealthy family, very influential. They're divided, the son, the father, and the son and his family, and the father and his wife, and the mother, I guess. And
they've been in court.
They've been in court. The parents called at some point, anonymously contacted Child Protective Services to report the son and daughter and their treatment of their children. They have 8 kids, this young couple does, and they're very good parents and very loving parents. There's just this division in the family. They don't get along, and the parents are kind of mean. In fact, I've had their knives lodged firmly in my back too, so I know how mean they are. So the children found out who had reported them. It's a long story, but it involved a court hearing. So there's just bad blood in this family. Today, I got a text from one of my reporters saying she had heard a story about the father. He's a doctor in town, or he's a retired doctor. He had a clinic right next to the family home place, which is a beautiful old home, that he built. He built the clinic and worked out of it for many years. His son bought the home place, the clinic, the whole block, lives there now with his family. This weekend, his son brought in bulldozers and was bulldozing the clinic. The father found out about it and went to the home and was not welcome on the son's property. One of the children was outside and told his grandfather, this is a tragic story, told his grandfather, you need to leave. He didn't leave. He said he was mourning. His son finally came out and asked him to leave. He didn't leave. They called the sheriff's office. The sheriff's deputy came and ended up, because the father refused to leave, handcuffing him and taking him to jail. Now, that's all a very sad story and very complex, and I don't know how you report a story like that, but I will tell you this. I checked with my reporter today to see if it made the blotter report.
The sheriff's blotter. This is a very big part of
it. It didn't. It's not anywhere in there. So that's my story. And I don't expect my staff to handle that. If it's a tough thing, I'll do it. And it's going to be tough.
We'll explain why that's a story. Why the fact that it's not in the sheriff's blotter made you suspicious.
Well, my hunch is that somebody requested that it not be included in the blotter report. And my hunch is that the son requested that. And he's a friend of mine. This is a friend. We're friends. We've worked on several issues together, and this is going to be a very difficult story to cover, but it's a story.
So that's just one little example. Another is the town has had an increasingly a bigger Hispanic population, immigrants, and Laurie was telling me, last year the valedictorian in the high school class 2 years ago was this great kid. He's an illegal immigrant, and she. Well, go ahead, you tell.
Well, he came to Canadian when he was in 8th grade. Didn't speak a word of English. Graduated as a valedictorian. He's going to Harvard today. Got a full ride to Harvard. Brilliant, brilliant kid. Just amazing. I did not write that story. And I didn't write it because his family was afraid. They're illegal. They don't have documentation. They're in this country illegally, and I didn't see how I could tell that story. Number one, without including that information, and number two, without endangering them or making them feel that they were in danger. I told the kid when he graduated, I said, someday when you're ready, I want to tell your story. And he said, we'll do it. So I look forward to that day. The same year, for homecoming, a Hispanic girl was named homecoming queen. It's a big deal in Canada. I mean, football's a big deal. The homecoming queen is a big deal. And I thought it was so great. I mean, I was just so excited about that happening until I was over at a friend's house one night. He lives next door to the board member, a school board member, whose daughter was also in the running for homecoming. And he was sitting outside with us talking, and he mentioned that he thought probably she was elected homecoming queen by a bunch of illegal immigrants, and how wrong that was. And I was just thunderstruck. I was so shocked that that would even come up. And I thought about it for a minute, and I said, I think that kid who made the winning touchdown, I think his parents are illegal. And I shut him up. But it still is shocking.
And you've written editorials in favor of the DREAM Act?
Yes.
Which is, So this is constant, and I want to leave room for questions. Because she's got so many stories. Just one more. Just tell the one about and she told us last night at the gathering we're at, about the apartment building, and if you can do it succinctly.
Okay, I'm not very good at that. Quick story, I was out taking pictures one day. Canadian has a housing problem, we've had it for decades. We've written about it until I'm just sick of it. To no effect. I'm standing by Canadian's latest, newest apartment complex, which was built 20 years ago. Canadian's a progressive town, it's an appealing town, it has great schools, a hospital, it's in a beautiful place, and people want to live there, but there's no place to live. I'm looking at this apartment complex and it's crumbling. You know, we ignore it because it's so ugly. It's just falling down. I have a camera, I go in, I start taking pictures. I'm shocked by the condition inside the fence. Just appalled. The concrete stairs to the second level are just falling down. I mean, I don't know how people walk up and down these every day. The siding's coming off. There's clearly water damage inside the siding. The windows are all falling out. The air conditioners are just hanging there. It's appalling conditions. In a proud, beautiful little town, these appalling living conditions. They're full all the time. They have a waiting list. I had my sports writer call the apartment manager to see if there were any available apartments. Nope, we'll put you on the waiting list. You know, how big is the waiting list? Oh, we've probably got about 50 people on it. It's just shocking, really. So I took lots of pictures. Instead of using words this time, I used pictures. I did a big 2-page spread just of pictures, and I described the pictures. I wrote a column about it, and I put the ugliest picture of them all on the front page, which I hated to do because I love my front page. It's a pretty front page. But it was ugly, and it got lots of attention. Within 5 minutes of the first newspapers hitting the newsstand, I started getting phone calls from tenants, from former tenants, telling me what it was really like inside those apartments. They were all afraid, every single one of them. Please don't use me. I can't tell you my name. Don't use my name. They'll know I called. I'll lose my home. And I quickly realized I couldn't possibly pursue this thing to the natural conclusion, which was having these apartments condemned. Because they should be, and they should be bulldozed. And I was really in a quandary about what to do until someone who used to live there called and said, this is horrifying.
Well, first, say why you couldn't pursue it. What was your reason for, and this is again,
there was no place to go.
These people would have been out of a home.
There would have been 50 families without homes, and there was nowhere else to go. So this former resident called and said, I'm in the building industry, I know builders, there's got to be somebody who wants to build there. It's a long story, but to make it short, we found out about a month ago that this group got approval for tax credit financing to build a 65-unit apartment complex in Canadian, Texas. It's a great story, and people are calling me all the time saying, when are they going to be built? When are they going to start? How soon will they be ready? I mean, the response has been huge.
But it started because you printed those pictures.
The picture made the difference. But the point of that story is, as grim as it can be in the newspaper business in a small town, there are good stories. You can make good things happen. And there's no better feeling than that. There's just nothing better.
I just love you. I get inspired all over you listening to her tell the stories. I just think it's wonderful. We've only got 15 minutes left. I'd like to open it up to people for questions, because there are a lot of good questions for me or Laurie. I mean, they're just...
For people who can stay, we can stay 5 minutes or so extra since we have to start late.
Yeah. So if anybody has questions about any of this.
Or comments.
Laurie, would you tell us something about your training as a journalist? Or was it all at your father's
It was pretty much at my father's knee. I didn't go to journalism school. And in fact, I only finished 1 year of college. I I went to a very liberal, unstructured college because it was the time. And I realized pretty quickly that it was a pretty expensive college, and I felt like I was wasting my parents' money, and that I could probably learn as much on my own as I was learning there. So I went off and lived and read and tried to learn that way. So I have no formal training other than just experience. And you know, I learn on the job every day. I mean, there are a lot of things I don't know. I don't know how to handle. So I'm still learning. I'm still figuring it out.
Yes.
I'm from the town of Texas on the other side. It's a bit bigger than this, but your stories about music really resonate with me. It's similar. And my question about towns like Canadian is, one, what keeps them afloat in terms of what businesses keep that a viable town, and how do you as a paper interact with it? How do you tell the stories about business?
Oil and gas and ranching are the main economic base. And we cover both. You know, fracking is a big story in the oil and gas industry right now. We don't have the problems with fracking in that part of Texas. The geology is different. We've had no water contamination. So there's really, the story that I'm trying to get at right now is the job-related casualties and injuries. And it's very hard to get that information, and I'm still trying to work my way through that. It's difficult. So that's a story that I've not told that I need to tell, but it's hard. So that's the main, you know, it's a very wealthy community in most respects. That doesn't mean that the newspaper business is particularly profitable. We've made a lot of enemies by the things we've written. I have a lot of advertisers who quit advertising because of something I've written about them. So it's precarious. It's always precarious. But there's money there. It's a good community. It's a progressive community. Good things are happening, and you know, I feel very confident in the future. Our readership is growing. It has only grown. So I feel very confident. I just need to figure out how to, I need a new business model, I think, in terms of advertising. I need to stop making advertisers mad, but I don't know what.
Yes.
Oh, has Patch come to Canadian yet? And how do you feel about their sort of way of doing hyperlocal?
I'm not very impressed with Patch, but I do understand in a way why it exists. And I think, look, I see a lot of really bad weekly newspapers, really bad. I'm appalled at what passes for journalism in some small towns. I really am. And some of these people are my friends. So there's a void in some places that deserves to be filled, that needs to be filled. And probably something like Patch.com is going to come along and fill that someday, if they can figure out how to make money doing it. However, it's a threat in some respects to me. I mean, I'm doing the job, and I worry about what it could do to me financially. Facebook, people post ads on Facebook now all the time. They're doing their classifieds on Facebook. Their businesses start their own Facebook pages and advertise what they once advertised in our paper. They're doing on Facebook. It's a problem, and I'm not kidding about the new business model. We've got to figure out some way to compete with that, or some way to bypass it, other than just. And the other problem is that we need to tell our readers, this is what supports this newspaper. We need to get that message out, and we're not very good at it.
And also, you were talking about how, I mean, she's way ahead, I think, from a lot of small-town newspapers. Her website's very good. I subscribe to it. It's $20 a year.
25.
25, I'm sorry. She just lowered it from what, 30?
35. It was my
35.
postal special. I went
Because
postal.
she went postal against the Postal Service. She's very angry that they've raised the rates and their delivery is so bad right now. So in honor of that, to protest that, she lowered her online subscription rate for her customers. It's called it the Postal Special. But as you and I were talking about, the cost of publishing online, of course, are tremendously less. I mean, it's than putting out a hard paper. So eventually, even if everything's online, it's cheaper to publish it. So she saves at that end. So it's.
But in many rural communities, it divides your community in a way because there are still people who don't have access, that kind of access to online, to the web. And you're cutting off a part of your community. I mean, one of the regional daily in our area, I understand is going to go entirely online in the next 2 years. And I just think it cuts a lot of people out of the loop, and I worry about that.
Aren't you still making more of your money on the hard copy too?
Yes, we are now. But I see it changing, and I see it being, well, the postal issue is a huge one. We haven't talked about that, but it's a huge issue. The post office is, in dire straits, and their delivery stinks. They treat newspapers badly, and they're constantly coming up with new rules and regulations for us to follow that even their local postmasters don't understand, don't know how to follow. And there's just hoop after hoop we're being asked to jump through. So online begins to look very appealing when you're dealing with that.
Two quick questions. What's your circulation number daily?
Our circulation is weekly 2,000.
Okay. And I notice you don't have any ads really on the front page.
No, we don't. Because I have an ad salesperson who's the best ad salesperson I've ever had. She was a waitress. She comes from kind of a rough family, considered rough rodeo family. The women in the family are kind of scared. Jaquita was a waitress and a very good one, and I used to see her when I went out to eat a lot. And we'd talk, and I realized she was very good at her job. I mean, she's very good at meeting people. She remembers everything. She's a hard worker. And I've had a really hard time filling this ad salesperson job, really hard. And every time I advertised it, she said, I'm interested in the position. So twice I kind of hedged and hired somebody else. The third time, I said to her, come in and talk to me. She did. I had a couple other applicants who were better qualified, who brought me great resumes, and I hired Jaquita. She has been a fireball, the best ad salesperson I've ever had, bar none, but she will not turn on a computer. I don't know how to get somebody who won't turn on the computer to go out and sell advertising online, but I'm working on it. It's the next territory I must cover. I'm working on it. I have. Now, we have our pages, our PDF pages. Most people don't even stop on the front page. They go directly to what we call our current issue. It's PDF pages of the newspaper. And you see the ads there. I mean, our advertisers are getting the full bang for their buck because their ads can be seen.
Where should I go here? What do you?
It's complicated. You're going to have to sign in.
It's complicated.
I don't know. Okay. But you can flip through the pages of the newspaper, and the ads are there. So we feel like our advertisers are getting a great service there. We just need to start marketing that way. And I'm not very good at marketing. I can write. I can pick fights. I can, wage war. I can go cover fires, but I'm not very good at marketing.
Right.
I take it from, even though things are changing rapidly, that your paper is economically making it. I just wonder what the position of other weeklies you do in your area or in the rest of the country, or small dailies was, they're still making money, unlike
Well,
the big
most
city
of the
papers.
small weeklies, the rural weeklies that are around me, they don't have a very big staff. We have a relatively large staff for our circulation.
How many?
We have 5, and when I started, we just had 3. And I was working 24/7, and I realized after about 5 years that I was going to die doing that, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So I raised rates, and I started hiring some people. Because I know people want the newspaper, they want the coverage, they're going to read it, they're going to follow it. I'm going to give them the best newspaper I can. And they'll pay for it. They're willing to pay for it. When I raised the rate from 75 cents to $1, the only complaints I got from people were, why didn't you, no, from 50 to 75, people said, why didn't you just make it $1? It'd be easier, you know. They're willing to pay for it. They're willing to support it. But a lot of smaller newspapers have not gotten there yet, and they struggle to cover a little bit of news in their community. And some of the editors go out and sell ads, which I absolutely refuse to do. I like to maintain the line between advertising and editorial, and it's pretty important to me. So it's hard to do, but. So they make it by having small staffs and limiting their coverage. I make it by, I guess, by having loyal readership and hustling ads pretty hard. A winning football team helps a lot. We've sold a lot of advertising from that. It's kept us alive.
How does this season look?
Good. We're picked to win state again. So we're just trying to make a little money while we can.
Have you found that Twitter and Facebook have, since you started Twitter and Facebook, it's increased your circulation at all?
You know, it's funny. I hate Facebook. I really do. I think people put things on Facebook and are not held accountable for them. It's that they'll, a rumor will start there and it'll be, 5 minutes later it'll be everywhere and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm a little horrified by what's on Facebook. The navel-gazing that's on Facebook is appalling. That having been said, it's a great tool for a newspaper. I find out stories that I might not have known about. I find out about them quickly. I have a pretty good idea of what a lot of people care about. It's a good hand on the pulse. If I need to get to a lot of people, get a message out quickly, I can do it there. So it's great for that. I still can't figure out Twitter because, as I said, I'm not very good at brevity. And I say too much, I write too much. I'm still working on that one. But my sports writer's great at it. He has a blog, he's doing Twitter, it's great. I think it makes the newspaper even more accessible. I think it makes us seem more accessible. I think people feel like seem more accessible. I think people feel like they have a buy-in to it, and we can always talk about what's in this week's paper and gin up some energy about that. And overall, I think it's a positive thing for me. I just need to accept it and learn how to use it.
Any other questions? It can be bigger than just Canadian.
Yes.
We covered other towns.
Buy the book, it's great.
Oh, thank you, Bryce.
No kidding, and it's right out there.
It's right out there. So you
Join me in thanking
I'll
these
sign.
two wonderful